Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is Charles Trump. Charles is senator from the 15th Senatorial District, which is Morgan County, Hampshire County, parts of Mineral, and parts of Berkeley County. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Russell. Pleasure to be here.
You're going to be the chair of the Judiciary Committee again this coming session?
It looks that way. We'll have our formal caucus on December 4th, and election of leadership. Mitch Carmichael, who is our presumptive leader of our caucus and Senate president, has indicated to me that he would like for me to chair the Judiciary Committee again.
Okay. It was sort of a wild election. The Republicans swept the state. They're up 20, I think it's 22-12 in the Senate?
22-12 is the margin in the Senate.
Okay.
Right.
And also similar, big margin in the House. In front of your office here in Berkeley Springs, you had a big Bill Cole for governor sign.
I did.
And counterintuitively, the Republicans won everything except the governorship. Why do you think it happened that way?
I don't know. Bill ran a strong campaign up here, did very well in the Eastern Panhandle, but there were parts of the state where he lost by the same margins or greater. So our new governor is going to be Jim Justice from Greenbrier County.
All right, and what's your take on Jim Justice? Do you know him? Have you met him?
I've met him one time, and I don't know him well, but I've sent him a letter. I'm looking forward to getting to know him and working with him to improve the prospects for the Mountain State.
I thought he did something pretty shrewd in Morgan County, like a week before the election, took out an ad in the paper saying, if you elect me, I'll take care of Kakapen State Park.
I saw that ad. It was a full page or half page ad, right. And I have saved a copy of it. I will have it in my jacket pocket all the time while I'm in Charleston, so that whenever I run into Governor-elect Justice, he'll then be Governor Justice, yeah. I'll have it with me to
What do you hear? You think so? All he has to do is, apparently sign this bond issue, and or does the legislature have to act again?
The legislation has already been passed. It was passed 3 years ago. So I think it's just a matter of action by the executive now to issue bonds.
And if he moves, we can see some construction starting sometime this year? Or?
Boy, that would be wonderful. I sure would. That would be great. I hope that's the case.
All right. Now, let's talk election a little bit.
Okay.
A guy who's named similar to you, Donald Trump, actually is the president.
Uncle Donald.
Okay, you call him Uncle Donald.
In the family.
But I didn't see a Trump sign, for Trump for president sign in front of your office. So I'm wondering, what was your take on Donald Trump?
I supported Donald Trump in the general election, and as you know, he carried West Virginia by a wide margin. So as we head toward January and inaugurations, I'm looking forward to Donald Trump becoming president of the United States, and I hope it'll mean good things for the country.
He says he will bring back coal jobs to West Virginia. How do you think he'll do that, or try to do that? And do you think he'll be successful doing that?
Well, I hope he will be. There are some regulatory things that could be done, I think, that would help make it easier for coal to compete. And I'm hoping that if we have some overall economic growth in the country, that will bode well for West Virginia's fossil fuel industries.
Morgan County is home to Mountain View Solar. Shouldn't we be moving towards renewable energy?
And we are. And I think, yes, I'm an all-the-above guy. I think we have to look at solar and wind and hydro and nuclear and fossil fuels. But we need to have all the above. The critical thing in my mind, Russell, is that America be and remain energy independent. That's critical. The problem with solar power and wind power, to a degree, at this point, is that you can't store it, and the sun doesn't always shine, as you know, and the wind doesn't always blow. So you need, and we will continue to need for a long time, natural gas and coal to provide the baseline for our electric grid.
People who studied renewable energy say it's not a question of science. We can get it done. It's a question of political will. Dominion Energy, for example, says renewable cheaper than fossil fuels now.
No. That's false.
You disagree with the
Yeah, no,
energy
I
on
mean,
that?
with subsidies perhaps. Renewables compete with fossil fuels as a result of government subsidies. But on a dollar for dollar basis, no, natural gas and coal are still far cheaper for producing BTUs than solar or wind.
Are you supportive of the proposed Mountaineer gas pipeline that'll go from Hancock to Berkeley Springs and then east?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's a resource that we want here in the Eastern Panhandle.
And do we need it?
Absolutely.
Why do we need it?
We need it for, U.S. Silica has been interested for a long time in natural gas. I think the primary motivator for starting it was the needs of the new Procter & Gamble plant that's coming to Martinsburg.
Right. I actually wrote to Procter & Gamble and asked them during the debate within the Public Service Commission process whether they have, they've signed a letter of intent to purchase gas from that pipeline. They said they hadn't. Do you know otherwise whether then, in fact, they want that gas?
There's already gas in Berkeley County, provided, as I understand it, by the same company that comes from Virginia. But my understanding from talking to Berkeley County's Economic Development Officer is that the Procter & Gamble facility is expected to use basically 100% of everything that company can provide on that existing infrastructure.
And will they need more gas? Is that what you're saying?
They will, and then other customers that are provided by that service line that exists over there now are apparently going to need gas as well. And there'll be opportunities in Morgan County for Morgan County customers to have natural gas.
That's unclear because a number of the landowners who've been approached by the company have asked, can we tap into the gas? And it's unclear whether they can or not. But one of the things that's happening is the company is approaching farmers and landowners along the proposed pipeline and threatening the use of eminent domain to take their rights of way if they don't agree to whatever the price is. And a number of people have signed over based on that threat. What do you think of the use of eminent domain by private companies for taking property?
You have to be very careful. Eminent domain should be used only for public purposes, but sometimes those are delivered by private companies. And the railroads, the electrical providers that we have, Potomac Edison, Allegheny Energy, are private companies, but they have eminent domain power because their utility is for public purposes. And I view gas lines in the same fashion.
Right. Did you see the recent West Virginia Supreme Court decision saying that eminent domain cannot be used to get access to do surveys on people's land for gas pipelines?
The McCurdy decision.
Yes.
I did see it and actually have a copy of it with me because you told me on the telephone you might want to ask me some questions about it. Right. It isn't as broad as that. The problem with that particular pipeline is that there was no public purpose for West Virginians on which the Supreme Court found, affirming the circuit court judge, that was a pipeline to provide gas solely to people outside the state of West Virginia.
Interestingly, in South Carolina and Georgia recently, there was a company called Kinder Morgan which wanted to build a gasoline pipeline through those two states. And there was an uproar similar to what's happening here in Morgan County, sort of a left-right coalition, environmentalists and landowners, farmers, opposed to it. The pipeline was going to go through the land of some conservative publisher, and eventually both the legislatures of South Carolina and Georgia passed a law saying you can't use eminent domain for gasoline pipelines. Now you're going to be head of the Judiciary Committee. Would you consider looking at the question of the use of eminent domain for private gain, for this kind of fossil fuel use? And just let them, in other words, if they wanted to build the pipeline, but you can't use eminent domain.
Well, I think what you have then is you have an opportunity for one person to obstruct something that may be for enormous public benefit for a number of people. you know, West Virginia has a long history of allowing eminent domain to be used for public purposes. You can't have, we're well beyond the stage, Russell, where you can say, I don't want my neighbor to have electricity because I don't want the line to go over my property. We're way beyond that. Now, I have heard some of the things that you've talked about, that some of the land agents for this particular company have been less than pleasant to deal with by local Morgan County citizens who've been approached by their land agents, and that concerns me deeply. And I'm going to demand a meeting with the company in Charleston and try to straighten some of that out. But eminent domain is appropriate for public purposes when it's necessary. Like many citizens of West Virginia and the whole country, I was outraged with the Kelo versus New London decision that the U.S. Supreme Court decided, well, probably 15 years ago now, in which they approved a condemnation which was, by all appearances, essentially for private purposes, and that was not appropriate, and in my opinion, is never appropriate.
Right. I guess the question is, I mean, I guess if the Public Service Commission says that it's a public purpose and that gives them the green light to go ahead and use eminent domain in this context, I guess the question is, should they be allowed to do that if, like, one argument is there's a glut of natural gas, we don't need it, and so there's not really a public purpose. And some people argue that a lot of these pipelines are being built for tax purposes, that there's a tax reason for them to build these pipelines. And this pipeline, for example, is being built before anybody even knows whether there's going to be gas to travel through it, because it's contingent on a Trans-Canada pipeline that's on the drawing boards that will come under the Potomac River and under the C&O Canal to bring the fracked gas from Pennsylvania to West Virginia.
Actually, my understanding is a little bit different than that. My understanding, and I'm not an expert on this particular project by any means, but my understanding is that the proposed pipeline that would go under the Potomac and into Morgan County and then eastward to Berkeley County would connect to an east-west transmission line that's already there.
Okay, but I'm saying this Mountaineer gas pipeline that's being proposed to cut through Morgan County would have nothing there would be no gas to move in it unless that pipeline's built under the C&O Canal. There's nothing to connect it to unless that pipeline is built. So they're moving ahead before they even know whether that pipeline can be built or not.
I see what you're saying, but it's the same pipeline, I guess, yeah.
Right. Two different companies. So there'd be two different companies. All right, you're heading to Charleston when?
We have interims, we have caucus and interims in the first week of December. So I'll be going down Sunday, December 4th. We'll be down there for most of that week. And then we'll have interims in the run-up to the convening of the regular session, which is January 11th, second Wednesday of January. And then because the Constitution requires it every 4 years, this is a year in which, upon convening and electing officers in January, the legislature is required to adjourn for 30 days. And the coming session starts in earnest this year in February.
And what's going to be on the agenda? What do you see as hot button issues that are coming up?
Budget, top of the list. I mean, budget is extremely difficult, and I'm sure that's going to consume the bulk of the legislature's time and energy this session.
And what we read is maybe a $300 million deficit. How do you propose closing it?
We're going to have to make cuts in governmental programs. I mean, I don't see any way around it. I don't think the legislature is going to have any appetite for general tax increases. The legislature has, and the governor have effected some cuts in the last 2 years, but I think we're going to have to do more of that.
Last time around, there was a tax increase on cigarettes.
Tobacco.
Did you support that?
I voted for it.
And But you don't foresee a similar tax increase this time around. Why not?
Well, the tax increase on tobacco products was controversial. I have a lot of constituents who are upset about my vote on that. We had to do it to bring the budget into balance. And it actually brought West Virginia, we had, before the bill passed, we had the 4th or 5th lowest tobacco taxes in the country. The problem for us here is that 2 of the 4 states which are lower than we are border states, and that creates competition problems, Virginia and Kentucky. So I don't know if that's responsive to your question. What was your
Well, I was looking at for example, one reason, there's an argument that one reason we're in a budget crisis is because of tax cuts that took place 10, 15 years ago on the top rung of West Virginia income earners and on businesses. So why not bring back some of that? Why not rescind some of those tax cuts to plug the hole?
Well, actually, I think it's partly right. There were tax cuts that were made over the course of the last 10 years, but I don't think the characterization of them is right. I don't think the legislature didn't lower the top marginal rate on income taxes or anything like that.
What about corporate tax?
The legislature eliminated the food tax, which, raised $150, $200 million a year.
What about the corporate tax?
The corporate income tax is lowered a little bit, but I don't think that's a big revenue ticket for the state.
All right. So bottom line, how are you going to plug the hole? Cuts of education? And
you want to try to do as little damage as you can to education. I think there are a lot of areas where we can cut. Education would not be high on my list of places to go. There are lots of programs in the state government that can be cut, I think, before you get to education. The governor's methodology over the course of the last couple of years has been to do percentage cuts across the board. And I think that actually dodges doing the hard work of figuring out which programs are not effective, which ones are duplicative of other efforts. And I hope we get to do some of that.
In the Judiciary Committee, what are your 1-2 issues do you think are going to be this time around?
Regulatory reform. We want to continue the states. We did a bunch of that in the last 2 years. Reducing the number of regulations that are impediments to the opening and growth of business, particularly small business, which I think is going to be the engine for the future of West Virginia and will help diversify our economic base. Now, it's not so much here in the Eastern Panhandle, Russell, but other parts of the state have been completely reliant on nothing but coal or fossil fuels, for a very long time, too long. And those sectors of the economy are and have always been volatile and subject to price swings and economic changes that cause booms and busts in coal, natural gas, oil production. So Bill Cole used to say on the campaign trail that in parts of the state, West Virginia has been a one-trick pony, and we have to do something to change that. We have to make it so that entire communities and populations are not completely ravaged whenever there's that volatility and cycling that you always expect to see at some level in those economic sectors.
All right, so regulatory reform 1, what's 2?
Infrastructure, we've got to make improvements to the state's infrastructure. I think for West Virginia to take the next big step into the 21st century economy, we have to have not only improvements to our traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, that sort of thing, but also broadband. That's going to be the key to, I think, West Virginia achieving its economic potential in the coming generations.
I saw that Governor-elect Justice said that he has already spoken with President-elect Trump and that
Uncle Donald, as we
Uncle
call him.
Donald, and that, you know, one left-right issue is going to be infrastructure. I mean, because there's something that the Democrats in Congress will get on board with. So in terms of infrastructure in West Virginia, are you saying relying on that federal push for infrastructure, or will it be something that'll be pushed here in West Virginia?
I'd like to see us do our own initiative in addition to or independent of that. You know, if it can be done collaboratively, that's great. You do it in cooperation with the federal government, but I would like to see the state take a leadership position on that.
All right, let's talk a little bit politics. Does it bother you at all that well, I think a number of times over U.S. history, the person who wins the popular vote loses the presidency?
No.
And why doesn't that bother you?
As you know from our previous discussions, I'm a supporter of the Electoral College. I think our framers, the framers of the United States Constitution, knew what they were doing and designed a system that has served the nation very well over the course of the last 240 years. Although we all cast votes, individual votes for President of the United States, you have to remember that the President of the United States, under the Constitution, is chosen by the states.
Doesn't it seem a touch undemocratic to you that the person with the least votes wins the presidency?
No, because the president is chosen by the states, and so what you have, as a result of this last presidential election 2 weeks ago, as an example, is Donald Trump won the popular vote in 49 of the 50 states. Hillary Clinton's margin in California is more than enough to offset it. But this nation is more than the California margin of Hillary Clinton supporters. The president is chosen by the states. The Electoral College gives a little bit of an extra voice to small states like West Virginia, who would never, ever see a presidential candidate if we didn't have an Electoral College. There'd never be one that set foot in West Virginia.
Right. But we don't see them now because of, I mean, one argument is if we got rid of the Electoral College, and then there is a push to get rid of it. If we got rid of it, then the candidates would be all over the country and not just in the swing states.
And that's false. The candidates would go to the areas with densest population. They would be in New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia. They'd be in the major cities. It's where they would be. It's where
but they weren't in West Virginia.
Sure they were.
I mean, during the primary.
Donald Trump was in West Virginia.
During the primary.
Yeah.
During the general,
well,
no.
And the reason I suspect is because the vote was not expected to be that close in West Virginia, which turned out to be right.
Correct. That's
you know, the beauty of the Electoral College is that if you study it over the course of elections, you see shifts over time as to where the candidates spend their time because they're going to maximize their opportunity to pick up swing states. If you had a pure popular vote and a presidency determined on that basis, the candidates would stay only in population centers.
And so this is a point of principle for you. It doesn't matter if the Republican won the popular vote and lost the election, you would still say keep the Electoral College.
The presidency is to be chosen by the states, and the 50 states now allow and the citizens of the state to make that decision how those electoral votes are cast. That, of course, is not required by the U.S. Constitution, but I think it's a good way to do it. But my position is that no vote by a West Virginia citizen for president should ever be canceled by the vote of a citizen from California or Maryland or any other state, only other West Virginians, as West Virginia chooses how to elect its presidential electors.
And so what's your prediction? Will eventually the country get rid of the Electoral College?
No.
Because there is this push from the states, as we've talked about, to pass, and a number of states have passed this law.
11.
Have passed a law saying
11 states have passed the National Popular Vote Act, and they're the states that would be beneficiaries. And when I say beneficiaries, they would have their voices enhanced in the choosing of the president. And they're the states you'd expect: California, New York. West Virginia will never, I would predict, go along with the National Popular Vote Act, nor should it.
And you won't, as my senator, you won't introduce legislation to that effect.
It will not be on the agenda of my committee while I'm in the West Virginia Senate.
Well, Charles, it's been a good conversation. I hope to have you back again because there's a lot more to talk about.
All right. Well, I always look forward to talking to you, Russell.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching This Week in Morgan County.